Good morning and welcome to our Holy Week devotion, the Wednesday edition. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're joining in. Before we begin, I do want to remind everybody that we will be doing our Wednesday evening conference call this evening. So don't forget that. Go ahead and jump in, and if you haven't done it before, give it a shot. And if you have any trouble doing it, then we will look at it and try to figure it out for you so that you can be involved. It's a great way for us to stay connected. I know I'm enjoying it, and many folks are mentioning to me that they're enjoying it as well. For this morning's devotion, I will be reading from the book of Mark, chapter 14, verses 1 through 11. I invite you to hear these words. It was now 2 days before the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. For they said, "Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar from the people." And while he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he was reclining at a table, a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly, and she broke the flask and poured it over his head. There were some who said to themselves indignantly, "Why was the ointment wasted like that? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor." And they scolded her. But Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She's done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them. But you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for burial. And truly, I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her." Then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray him to them. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money. And he sought an opportunity to betray him. What an interesting reading for this Wednesday of Holy Week. It is a reading that has some bookends and then something in the center that I want to cause your attention to. Now, when I say bookends, I'm talking about the beginning and the end, of course. In the beginning, it was the day before Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The chief priests and scribes were in conversation with one another. They are now beginning to plot how they can arrest him so that they can put him to death. But they don't want to do it during the feast because they're worried about the crowds. And then at the end, Judas Iscariot goes to the chief priests in order that he may betray Jesus to the chief priests and the scribes. And when the chief priests and scribes heard it, they were glad. They promised to pay Judas, and then Judas went out and sought to betray him. So at the beginning of our reading, there is evil. At the end of our reading, there is evil. There is betrayal. There is exclusion. There is pushing down. There is secret plot to kill Jesus. But in the middle of all of that horrible stuff, something beautiful happens. A woman comes into the room. We don't really know who this woman is in John's gospel, although theologians have different theories, but that's not really what matters in our context for this morning. She comes in with this alabaster flask of pure nard, very expensive. 300 denarii is a huge amount of money. She breaks it and she pours it over Jesus' head. Now, some say, and we believe that it's Judas that's saying this, we could have sold that. We could have used the money for the poor. Probably not really interested in giving it to the poor, but maybe lining their own pockets. But nevertheless, Jesus says, we're not going to talk about that. You'll always have the poor. You can always do good to them and for them. But you will not always have me, Jesus said. What she has done is beautiful. That's in verse 6 of what I read a few moments ago. I want you to think about something today. In light of this beautiful gesture, in the midst of betrayal and death and plots and secrets and planning and scheming and strategizing to kill Jesus Christ, there is this beauty. There's a lot going on in our world. I've said it over and over and over again. I know that we're all dealing with so many emotions, with so many concerns, with so many frustrations, with so many evils, with so many pains, with so many sufferings. But in the middle of all this, there is the beauty of Jesus Christ. There is the beauty of worship and praise and drawing near to Jesus Christ. Think about your worship. Think about your praise. Think about your prayer. Think about your journey. Think about your faith. Would God call your worship of Him genuine and beautiful? What would God say about the way we worship and praise, even when we can't do it together, even when we're doing it from miles apart? Let's take a few moments to remember the character of God, to remember the gifts of God, and why God, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit alone, our triune God alone, is worthy of worship as King and of Lord as everything. If there's any apathy or wrong motives, we talked about this last Sunday. If there's any apathy or wrong motives for worshiping in our hearts, in your heart and my heart, let us ask God to purify us from all unrighteousness, to make our worship genuine, to make our worship beautiful. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.